I have become one of those people that thrives in the office environment. Although I will say it was just a few short years ago that I couldn't wait to leave the office.
But I've worked in corporate talent acquisition for over 20 years. So I've been at the peak where my hair's on fire and we're trying to fill as quickly as we can. And then there's been those downtimes. But in those downtimes, that's where we can be efficient. So it's really important that a talent acquisition infrastructure and strategy lines with the business strategy.
I feel like everybody should be an entrepreneur at some point. There is something about just having everything on you.
So you've got to take those risks in consideration when you make big changes like that.
Yes, AI is going to continue to move forward.
What are the budgets? What's your compensation philosophy? What's our employer brand? Why do people want to work for you? You have to have all of these things lined up.
It's such an interesting area because the efficiency of just letting AI do your screens is like, oh my God, like we can actually get through all of these candidates and try to find the right ones. Yes, there are some functions within every business today that we will not necessarily need a team of humans to be doing.
And there was a demand and supply issue. Honestly, it's like, how do we find the top talent quickly enough to support this massive boom that kind of caught us by surprise and you weren't prepared for it?
Welcome back to Shifting Talent, the show where we're exploring how the hiring landscape is changing from the perspective of both tech and talent leaders. And today, I'm so excited to have Rachel Blanton joining the show. Rachel's a talent acquisition expert. She's led talent acquisition teams for some of the biggest names in the industry, like Fossil, Match Group, Stitch Fix, ShiftKey. All of this before starting her own company earlier this year called Ignite Talent. So I'm really excited to be able to get some really great insights from Rachel today on where things are actually headed in talent acquisition. So Rachel, hello, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rob. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited about this conversation.
Absolutely. And I want to dive right in because I think the talent acquisition space has been basically a roller coaster for the last 5 years. And I'm curious, there may be folks watching today who haven't necessarily been following the space, seeing exactly what's actually happening right now. Could you take a moment just to catch people up on the last 5 years in talent acquisition and just the absolute crazy ride that's been?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I feel like talent acquisition over the last 5 years has been every ride at Six Flags. It's been every roller coaster. There's been ups, there's been downs, there's spins and pivots. And obviously a lot of that it started with the pandemic. Of course, we all had to pivot so quickly in corporate talent acquisition and HR functions and support employees. And then there was hiring needs that boomed and then it went down. And then, of course, we've seen a lot of layoffs as well in different industries. And then, of course, in recent years, AI is here and it's here to stay. And that is the hot topic of conversation right now in talent acquisition. So it really has been a roller coaster ride for talent acquisition. And I think there's some good things that are coming out of these changes and of course some real challenges as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, take a moment and chat a little bit more about the boom that came out of COVID, because I really feel like that was a time for talent acquisition where things just, absolutely went through the roof in a way that honestly, I think we haven't seen in quite some time. And especially for tech roles, we just saw hiring take off, completely. What do you think was the biggest challenge for recruiters and talent acquisition teams to be able to adapt so quickly to those needs that kind of seem to come from nowhere?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key thing is adapting quickly. People want to hire quickly. They wanted to hire quickly. And there was a demand and supply issue. Honestly, it's like, how do we find the top talent quickly enough to support this massive boom that kind of caught us by surprise and you weren't prepared for it? So it's balancing that headcount demand with the resources, with the talent that's available, and particularly in tech, when you're looking for a really specific skill set that's in high demand, then you've got a lot of competition. So recruiters have got to work that much harder to dig and find that talent that they need for the business. And then that boom at the time, a lot of people that had those niche skill sets, they were a little spoiled because they were in high demand, right? And so that they could determine where they wanted to work. They maybe coming out of COVID, they like working remote. They don't want to go back into the office. So there's all these different challenges that recruiter has had to match the right talent and finding it with the company with the speed that they needed.
Yeah, yeah. And you think about like the market that we sit in today and how drastically different it is, even for those, like we used to call them purple squirrels when I was a recruiter, right? Like these people that were hardest to find in such high demand. And they could set their price and, to your point, work from anywhere they wanted to. Some moved internationally because they're like, hey, I'm going to get out of here and go just enjoy my life. I'll work wherever I want to. Now we are back in this world where we're seeing return to office be one of the key things that we're looking at. And it's almost like all these folks who have been working remotely now are starting to see that looking for that next opportunity is getting a little bit tighter. And so from a talent acquisition standpoint, like there are some unique challenges now, but you're kind of back in the driver's seat too of being able to, work with candidates on, hey, here's exactly what the company is looking for. And these are some of the tight requirements that we have. And we may not be able to work with you just because you were the best, 3 or 4 years ago. Talk a little bit about how some of that is shifting now in the market that we're in.
Yeah, no, great question. And that's challenging as well in itself when you've had a remote workforce and now the business wants to return to office. You've already opened up the doors to remote working. And so from a talent acquisition and an HR perspective, you have to think, okay, well then the people that you already have employed in a remote setting, what are you going to do with them? Are you asking them to come into the office too? Because are they in a different state? Can you support them with a relocation package? And then when you're looking for new people, are you limiting your pool? If you're saying you have to live within, obviously a commutable distance to an office, you've then lost sight of some great talent in other states that you could have hired in a remote setting. So I think there's pros and cons, and that's obviously why it's such a big conversation, because you've got leaders that really believe in in-person collaboration.
Yeah.
Then you've got people saying, well, we've worked very well and, very productively remotely. And then you've got candidates with certain skill set. You're like, I really, really want you to come and join this business. And they say, well, I don't want to come in the office, or I don't live near the office, or I'd have to relocate and I don't want to relocate my family. So there's lots of challenges with that return to office, policies. But then of course, with the layoffs that we've seen, this has been it's been the toughest job market in like 10 years. And I think particularly in tech, we've never really seen anything like it. So I do think that there is more flexibility from candidates because they want to find the right job. So, and again, demand and supply situation is they may have to relocate in order for that job. So very interesting. We've gone from here to here to here. So going back to that roller coaster, it's been a roller coaster, I think, from everyone's perspective, talent acquisition, from candidates, from business leaders, very interesting times.
What's that conversation like in the boardroom when you're advising chief people officer and the CEO of a company about, are we going to go through with this RTO plan after the years that we spent allowing folks to be anywhere? What does that look like?
Interesting, because there's different perspectives. You really have some leaders who have grown up in a corporate environment where they've really benefited from that in-person collaboration. And even during COVID, they had to pivot because they had to, but not because they wanted to. So the opportunity to get people back in the office is where they're going to go. But then you've got other leaders who saw the benefit in a remote environment, and they themselves may have benefited from working in a remote environment. So there's definitely been some conflict in conversations with leaders. What is the right thing to do by the business? sometimes you've got to take that personal hat off and do what is right by the company and the goals. And again, like I said, when you've already opened up the doors to a remote workforce, how are you going to deal with them if you start bringing people back in? It gets very complicated. And are you at risk of losing top talent by demanding people to come into the office? We've seen it. I'm not going to mention any names, but you've got these companies that are losing great people because of this RTO policy that people, they didn't sign up for that. It's a switch and bait situation. They signed up to be remote, and then a few months in, a year in, it's like, oh, we now need you in 5 days a week. That's not what they signed up for. So you've got to take those risks in consideration when you make big changes like that.
Yeah, a couple of things that are there that I think is worth exploring a little bit. On one hand, you have these experienced folks on the team who have already done their time in the office, if you will, right? And they have grown up in the office. They've reached a point in their career where they know what they're doing. They don't really need help from a lot of folks if they're an IC. And so now it's just about delivering and doing their job. On the other hand, we have this question of how are we going to create more top performers? And is the most effective way of doing that in the office? And we do a ton at HTD Talent with junior talent, right? And supporting them. And we have found by far it's a much better experience for them in terms of their growth and how quickly they're able to make an impact and continue to be able to drive their careers if they're in an office environment. But that really coincides with the fact that there are more experienced people that they're seeing in the office. It's not just about being at the office, it's about the collaboration that happens. It's about the connections that happen as well in the break room, on the elevator, on the way up, running into people. Like that is just one of those things where I feel like the people who need to be in the office the most are going, but not necessarily being supported, because where I see the exception being made by companies for people to continue to be remote are those most senior people who are effective and impactful and they're doing what they need to do, except it's just not the same of being able to train up the younger folks who are on the team who are trying to learn and grow. Like how do you see that?
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. And here's the thing, regardless of where you're at in your career, I really think it's a personal preference. Not everybody wants to work from home. A lot of people get a lot of energy from being with other people. Then you've got the ones that, even if they're new in their career, they've grown up in a digital age. Working sort of remotely, talking through a screen is very normal to them, and that could be their preference, right? So I think it really is such a personal decision, and that's why it's so hard to figure out what is best for your workforce. The way I see it, though, is even if you have some people in person, you've always got those team members that are remote. So the important thing is how do you make them still feel connected, even with the people that are in the office. So more often than not, you see people in conference rooms all day because their team members are on the screen. Well, then you've got the argument of like, well, I could have done that from home. So, but listen, I hear you. I think there's a lot of benefits to being in person. I get a lot of energy from people, and but there can be some benefits from home too. And I think hybrid is really the sweet spot for most people, which is why I think people get frustrated with job postings when it's like they haven't made that very clear. Is it fully remote? Is it in the office, or is it hybrid? And what do we mean by hybrid? 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week. But hybrid gives people the best of both worlds. And I personally feel like that's probably the better option to suit everybody. I don't know. What do you think?
I have become one of those people that thrives in the office environment. Although I will say it was just a few short years ago that I couldn't wait to leave the office. I feel like it's one of those switches in your career. At some point, you kind of flip, you get attached to the mission and the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish. And to me, the best place to be able to accomplish that is from the office when you have everybody around. But I also recognize that it just wasn't that long ago for me where I'm like, I can do my job from anywhere. Like, why do I need to be in the office? Or especially like you were describing in the office, sitting in a conference room with other people who are remote or in other office locations. It's effectively the same thing. But let's shift this back, to the talent acquisition side of the house, because one of the things that's happened over the last few years that honestly has been unfortunate is the way that companies, as we've gone into these cost-cutting kind of times during this economic uncertainty, and especially with AI coming onto the scene, talent acquisition teams have been hit hard in a lot of cases. And unfortunately, when the purse strings get a little tight, we've seen talent acquisition, internal corporate recruiting be sometimes the first to go, the first in the chopping block. I'm curious, from a corporate standpoint, there's two sides of this that maybe you can chat through. It's understandable that if we're not bringing in a ton of talent right now, maybe we don't need the talent acquisition function the way that it existed. But there's also some parts of talent acquisition that I think are easy to misunderstand from the corporate layer that can still be very valuable during a down cycle of hiring. Can you talk a little bit about just, the both sides of that coin and what you've seen and where the value really does lie within talent acquisition, whether hiring is rocking and rolling or a little bit down?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So to your valid point, companies look at their hiring teams predominantly, obviously, to hire their employees, right? So if they're then not hiring, then they question why they need us. And if we're on a permanent payroll, they start to question how we're impacting the bottom line. But I've worked in corporate talent acquisition for over 20 years. So I've been at the peak where my hair's on fire and we're trying to fill as quickly as we can. And then there's been those downtimes. But in those downtimes, that's where we can be efficient. That's where we can revisit our best practices, our processes. Do we have tools and systems in place to make sure we're hiring the best talent as quickly as we can? And getting ahead of it so that we can work with the business and say, hey, what's your headcount plan? What is your goals for next year? Because instead of coming to us saying, oh my gosh, we've got this urgent position and we need it yesterday. Well, if you told us that 3 months ago, we could meet your target. And that's how we can really partner with the business and drive your business, by being a strategic partner. But we have to work together. Don't look at recruitment as transactional. Look at us as a business partner, because that's really what we are. And so in those downtimes, we can be pipelining candidates. You hear people say, always keep your networking warm. Always reach out, even if you've got a job and you're not looking for a job. You keep networking, right? If you make sourdough bread, you gotta keep feeding it. Otherwise it's gonna die. You gotta keep watering your plants because they're going to die. It's the same with recruitment. We shouldn't come to a screeching halt, because then when you need us again, we've got to crank up that recruitment machine again. Whereas if we've been plugging away in the background by fine-tuning our processes, still going to events, networking, building our pipeline of talent, when you come to us and say, hey, we need this headcount, we've got some people we can already plug into, So that is where we can really, really add value. And unfortunately, companies have to make tough decisions, and I get it. And so when they're looking at the cost, recruitment is an area that gets impacted, but it does them a disservice, because when they need to hire again, we have to work that much harder, that much quicker to get to where they need to be.
Yeah.
But I will say that's what I think is the benefit of fractional recruiters, because then that gives companies flexibility. Instead of having, a recruitment leader or a team of recruiters on permanent staff, if you actually had contract recruiters or fractional recruiters, you could hire us for a period of time during your peaks, right? But we know your business. We're an extension of you. So it's seamless. And then we're like, you're good. We've got you in a good place. Great. Now we can pivot somewhere else. But then when you peak again, you go, can you come back because we've got this hiring need, right? Instead of having us on a permanent payroll, which I know is expensive, right? Having fractional recruiters gives them flexibility, and it gives the recruiter flexibility too.
That's actually a great insight because I know so many recruiters who over the last few years, some have left the industry because they felt like they got spit out during COVID, hiring came down. Then they all found crazy contract recruiting jobs during the boom, 2022, 2023, and they were making double what they used to make.
Oh, yeah.
And then as soon as the hiring cycle, again, started to slow down, we saw tech layoffs get started, and I think it was October of 22, and 23 was worse, and 24 has just kind of been flat. And then now where we sit today, we're starting to see a small, tick up, but it felt like an industry to the peers in my network who were like, this isn't sustainable for me. I can't keep doing this up and down, and now we're in demand and now we're not. I love how you talked about the different things that could be done during a down cycle that are important. Like there's business value that's being created here when we're not having to go 100 miles an hour, and we can really make sure that we have the right people. How do you find the balance for contract recruitment, for fractional recruitment? And do you see that as a transition that maybe a corporate recruiter today who's concerned about what's going to happen with me long term should be thinking about that kind of path for themselves?
I think they should absolutely be thinking about that path for themselves. But I also understand that's quite nerve-wracking too. A lot of people, they want stability. They like the corporate environment. They want to be part of a permanent team. They might not want to pivot from client to client. However, it's also wonderful for them to work with lots of different clients, because then you're experiencing different industries. You're working with lots of great different people. You're applying your knowledge and expertise in different ways. And it enables you to continue the career that you've worked hard on. And it gives you security in a more flexible way. But I definitely, over the last few years, I'm sure you've seen it, Rob, there's been such a tremendous growth in contract recruiters and fractional work, because companies are seeing the benefit from that by getting the expertise that they need, but just on a short-term basis. That doesn't mean less quality. That actually means you're hiring great expertise, but for a shorter period of time, but it's very, very impactful. And then it's great for the recruiters that are experiencing this tough job market, and it keeps them sharp. But it does take effort, like I said, with networking to find those clients where you can support them. But they should be thinking about that.
I want to shift a little bit over to just the building the overall talent acquisition function, which you've had experience with at different stages, coming into companies that have a bunch of infrastructure that might be really bad and has to be changed. You've been in some environments where there is almost no infrastructure and you had to build from the ground up. What would you say are maybe some of the common mistakes that companies make when they're setting up this talent acquisition function from both a people and an infrastructure standpoint, in making sure that they get that right?
I think one of the oversights is really not having a clear plan. And it's like, we need to hire people, so go, go, go. Well, how many people do you want to hire? What's a priority position? What impact do you need to see immediately to drive your business? Even tier positions, what's a priority 1? What's a priority 2? What's a priority 3? And then do you have the resources to support those hiring needs and hiring demands? So it's really important that a talent acquisition infrastructure and strategy lines with the business strategy. So it goes back to my point about being a strategic partner. We need to understand what is the ultimate business goal, and then we can build that structure to support it. If you're going to hire 10 people in a year, great. If you're going to hire 5,000 people in a year, that's a very different story, right? So you're going to need more recruiters. You might have different systems and different workflows depending on the departments that you're supporting. So like if you're hiring in the tech world, or you're hiring in manufacturing or retail, there's different processes that you can apply to those functions. And so it's really important, again, that talent acquisition understands the business goals. What are the budgets? What's your compensation philosophy? What's our employer brand? Why do people want to work for you? You have to have all of these things lined up so that you attract the right candidates that have the skills that you need, and they go, yeah, that's where I want to work. So the infrastructure is so incredibly important before you get up and running with your hiring. And so getting back to your original question, the mistakes is not having a clear hiring plan, maybe be too excited about all the shiny tools and objects out there, and before you know it, you've gone and signed 20 contracts and you're spending a ton of money on tools that you don't need. I'm a big fan of streamlining systems and processes, keeping it simple but making it efficient, and then finding a great balance between human recruiting, and we're getting into the AI piece now, and then what AI and processes can really support the hiring. So that's what I think.
Yeah, and obviously I'm in the tech recruiting space. You were talking a little bit about functions. I'm sure that it's true to say that not all hiring functions are created equally. Of course, in tech, we like to think that we're special, right? So I'm curious from your perspective on this, what are some of the functions that just carry some big time nuances when it comes to being able to build talent acquisition out for those specific areas?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, definitely, obviously in tech, and I touched on this earlier, which is those hard to find skill sets, that are in very high demand. So, machine learning, when that first came out, well, there was only a very few people that were really skilled in that area. So, of course, then you've got a demand and supply issue. And then it's just like, okay, well, if you're hiring in such a niche skill set, how are you going to set them up for success? And how do you evaluate and identify them as the right person for the role that you need in the company? So, there can be some sort of pain points there, figuring that out. Also, when it comes to technology, obviously, you want to make sure they do have that technical skill set. So sometimes there's a lot more assessments involved that can make the process a little more lengthy and complex.
So let me ask you really quickly about the hiring process, because on one hand, if you're going to hire people and have some extra assessments and things like that built into the process, it slows down the process, right? At the same time, sometimes it's good to be intentional about the people who are coming in to join the team. These are full-time employees. So we're really wanting to make sure that we have the right people for the long term. How do you balance that in your mind?
Intentionality is definitely key. And so every stage in that hiring process needs to make sense, and it needs to add value. And you need to have that mapped out at the beginning, so that you're not extending it part way through. Well, let's add in these people, let's add in this assessment. And before you know it, you're 20 steps deep and the poor recruiter's been in the process for several months. That does not feel good. The balance comes in with, of course, we need to be intentional. We need to hire the talent that we need. But there's a human going through that process. So let's set them up for success from the beginning by being really transparent. This is our process. We have these assessments for these reasons. So we'll have a recruiter screen and then these assessments, and then you'll meet the team, or whatever your process is. Be transparent and tell that candidate up front, because they will either buy into it or they would not buy into it. But get that partnership right from the beginning, being very clear on what that process looks like. And if you've got your interviewing team on the same page too, it doesn't have to be a lengthy, clunky process. It can be tight, it can be efficient, but it all stems from the preparation and having everything mapped out up front and not kind of winging it as you're going along. So there's no point working too fast, because it actually then just slows you down. Take the time to map out what your goal is, what are the skills you're looking for. This all comes out of an intake session, and then recruiters are very clear. They can then target the ideal candidates. They can tell the candidates what to expect, and then they can hold their hand throughout that process. It should be seamless with minimal sort of clunkiness. But it's important. I know there's lots of mixed feelings about, oh, you shouldn't do assessments, take home homework. Don't get me wrong, I am not a fan of taking candidates' time to do very in-depth, lengthy, strategic projects that really mount to several hours. but a short assessment to get a good pulse check on how they tie in with the business, I think can be beneficial. But you've got to find that balance between that, so you're not abusing that candidate's time.
Yeah. I want you to answer a question for the staffing agencies out there as well, because I have always been on that side of the coin. And I think outside looking in, when we're talking with talent acquisition teams, it almost always feels competitive in some way, shape, or form, right? Where it's like, it's a zero-sum game. Either you all are going to fill the role or we're going to fill the role. When you're building out a talent acquisition function, how do you as a leader think about staffing firms, whether it's contract, permanent help? Where do they fit into your overall strategic playbook?
I think they have a very, very valuable place. You may not need a recruitment agency or staffing firm for every single position if you do have an in-house team. But again, you have to look at that strategically. If you have a very highly confidential position, a very sensitive hiring situation, maybe executive recruiting, and you have an internal team that actually hasn't done executive recruiting before, that's where you would go and get the specialty support that you need. And you would do that in any business function, right? It's just like if you're rolling out a specific marketing campaign and you don't have the internal resources, you would go to a marketing agency that has that particular expertise. So recruitment agencies are incredibly valuable. I've partnered with many. I started off that side of the fence before I went internally as well. And it shouldn't be a competition. You should be an extension of the business. We're hiring you for a particular reason. And so let's work on this together. And it should never be a competition. There shouldn't be any sort of conflict there. And I know that does exist, but it shouldn't.
Yeah. I couldn't speak probably for every agency out there, at least at their goal is to be that partner, to be the extension of the talent acquisition system. But there's competition in the market as well, right? There are so many staffing firms out there. So my next question for you, how many phone calls a day were you getting from staffing salespeople? And what did somebody actually have to say to get through with you? Let's say they did get through with you. What was the value proposition you were actually looking for when it came time to we're going to actually add a new vendor to our list? What did that have to look like? And maybe this will help some of the folks out there so they can stop calling 100 people a day and figure out who are the right people to contact.
I think the communication that makes it very clear that they understand your business, they know what roles that you're really hiring for, maybe even explain how they have filled that type of position in the past and why that's their expertise and how they can add value. But if the messaging is a bit more, dare I say, cold calling, where it doesn't feel personal, it doesn't feel like they're connecting the dots to the business, or you're not going to solve my problem, it's more about you want my business as opposed to this is how you can help me. Because that's what leaders need. Like, oh, thank goodness. Yes, Rob, I would love to partner with you. We're dying over here. We've got so much going on. Can you take this? And I think that's the angle that you would need to come in at. It's just like, how are you going to help me? And how are you going to benefit the business? And where does your area of expertise really lie? Because I think we all have those specialty areas. You know, if you've worked in tech your entire career, that's wonderful. But you don't understand marketing or manufacturing, that's not your area of expertise. So it goes back to the word intentional. Intentionally pinpoint the clients that you know you can be a great extension to, and you perhaps have the pipeline and talent that can really service them.
I love that answer, because I think that there is just this tendency right now, especially with staffing firms who are struggling in the current market, to want to be all things to all people. And we can recruit on anything. We'll fill whatever roles you need. Just tell us, we're happy. We'll reduce our fees, whatever the case is. You can hear the desperation there. And trust me, I sympathize with those who are definitely struggling in this current market. But it sounds like your advice to them is if you really want to get through, there's value in not doing everything, but niching down. Here's what we're really good at, and then matching that with companies that you know need that thing that you're good at. Did I hear that right?
Absolutely. That's exactly what you should do. I mean, I myself personally, I've had people reach out to me recently wanting my support on certain positions, and I have said no because it's not my area of expertise. And I would be a disservice to them. And I don't want to be a disservice to them. I would rather then pinpoint them or steer them to somebody that I know, like, hey, I'm probably not the right person that can help you with this, but I know somebody else that can, you know? And so I myself, with my own business, I've had to be very true to myself, what I can do, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, and where I want to work and where I don't want to work, you know, because I'm not right for everybody. And same with other recruiters, really focus on your niche skill set. Where have you been successful? And I think really focus on that. And I'm not saying that means you can only work on that, you know, one particular industry or that particular skill set, but don't spread yourself too thin. I think there's a disservice to being too much of a generalist. Be a little bit of a specialist, but still have some flexibility within those boundaries. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, you're saying, tell me what you're good at. Like, of course, everyone is good at something. And of course, if you're looking to have a problem solved, you want to know you're handing it off to a company that's really good at the problem that you actually have. I love what you said. Basically, what I heard is you gain credibility by saying no to things that you're not good at and maybe recommending someone else.
I mean, I'd like to think so. I just, I'm all for just being transparent and honest, and I pride myself on doing a good job. And so I want people to be successful. I want businesses to be successful. And so I would hate to overpromise and underdeliver. So if I can't service you, then I'm not going to do it. But I will sure as heck refer you to somebody. And it's the recruiter nature in me as well. You know, if I see job opportunities, my immediate thought is, oh, who do I know that could do that? You know, let's send it their way. And I think we should be doing that. I think we should always have that mindset of who are the right partners to work with, and let's recommend people and talk and network, and don't be so in your lane, you know.
Yeah. This wouldn't be a 2025 podcast if we didn't mention AI and have a few questions about that. So of course I have to go there with you. And you actually had an interesting LinkedIn post today that I found fascinating. But we're talking about the sheer number of applications that are going into any job these days. And there's, again, a couple sides of the coin. There's a side of the coin that there's a bunch of AI slop, just absolute tools blasting resumes into applicant tracking systems and applying to jobs. But then there's also this concept of like, how many resumes can a recruiter actually look at and understand who is the right fit for the job, and make sure that we give the candidates who take the time to apply a fair shot at actually being considered for this job. How do you view both sides of that coin?
Oh my goodness, where do I start with this? I have so many thoughts about this. It's so hard because first of all, I really feel and understand the pain points that candidates are having in this market right now. And I really hate that they're getting lost in the shuffle. It infuriates me, quite honestly, that there's fake candidates out there, fake resumes. I just don't get it. I don't understand it. And I just think it's terribly unfair for qualified candidates to go amiss. So I really sympathize with the candidates and the frustrations that they're feeling with the application process and the job market today. And then on the flip side of that, you've got recruiters being overwhelmed with a high volume of applications, and many of those are fake candidates. And I have friends and I have colleagues in recruiting that are now talking to fake candidates. It's a bizarre world that we're in. But my post today was really about controlling what you can. We can't get rid of those fake candidates, unfortunately, but you can control your pool of candidates. So don't leave your job posting up for several days, allowing this influx of 1,000 resumes, because you're not going to be able to go through 1,000 resumes. You're just not. Okay. So shut it down, shut the post down once you've got, say, 100 candidates or whatever you can manage, because again, it's not one size fits all. You may be a recruiter that's completely overwhelmed with several positions, and you may be only be able to view, say, 50 at a time. But take the post down, and then you have to really evaluate, well, if I can't get 5 to 10 really good candidates out of this pool of candidates, what am I missing? What's wrong? Is it the job posting, or really is it the majority of this 50 are fake candidates? And that's going to be hard to figure out and identify if they're fake until you talk to them. And so AI really has its place. I love AI from an efficiency standpoint. I think for recruiters, it can be your right-hand friend when it comes to improving, getting rid of ghosting. Don't get me started on ghosting. AI should communicate with every candidate. Automate your communication, okay? You should have templates. Use AI to communicate with your candidates. Speed up the hiring process by prompting hiring managers to respond to an interview invitation or a scorecard or whatever the case may be. The admin portion that can really bog us down in the hiring process, that's where AI can be beneficial. But should AI be making fake resumes and harming humans? Absolutely not. Should you use AI to replace the hiring decision of a human so you can sit back and do something else? Absolutely not. You as a human being, as a recruiter, should still make the decision on what human goes through that process. I'm pretty passionate about that, you can probably tell. So I just think AI really has its place. It does. And here's the thing, it's here to stay, so you need to embrace it, but let's use it in the right way and not a harmful way. And I think that's where the conflict is right now. We're seeing the benefits and we're seeing the harmfulness of AI. And I'm really hoping over the next few years, sooner rather than later, we can get a good, healthy balance on that and how AI really shows up in the hiring process.
Have you found any way for recruiters to be able to easily spot an AI fake resume and get that out of their pipeline?
I think it's very hard to identify a fake resume because I think AI is quite sophisticated. And here's the thing, a lot of real humans are using AI to write their resumes. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think, again, use it to enhance and help you, but not forge your resume. But to your question about actually identifying a fake resume, I think that's incredibly hard until you actually get on a call with a candidate. And that's where I'm really concerned when companies are using AI as the very first conversation with a candidate. Because at what point does the candidate talk to a human? In which case, by that point, you may have lost several weeks when you've really then identified that this human is not skilled and qualified for the role, and they've, very much enhanced their resume. Or you've gone on a call and it's a bot. And I've had colleagues going, I've just had my very first recruiting call with a robot, and it's frightening. But if AI is an interviewing AI, at what point, when does the human come in to steer us back into the right direction?
Yeah. It's like it's such an interesting area because the efficiency of just letting AI do your screens is like, oh my God, like we can actually get through all of these candidates and try to find the right ones. But where does the cultural and the personal connection, like that first interaction that you have as a candidate with this company that's to be your future employer, where presumably you'll spend years of your career, a finite career with this company? There's something that still bothers me about just, it being a 100% AI step. I'm not there yet. I really can't get there yet, but I wonder what direction this is going to go. I talked with someone last week who was really big on like, let's leverage AI while having a human in the loop. And I kind of feel like that's where you're taking this with the way that a talent acquisition function can make sure that we have feedback from hiring managers and candidates know where they are in the process and all of these things that can be happening. We can leverage the strengths of generative AI to be able to actually empower that and make sure. But yeah, I'm really, really not a fan of kicking off the process of bringing someone into a new company and that being a 100% just AI, you and the machine. That's all I can see. It's just you and the machine. You're
Yeah.
talking into the camera.
Well, and
You
also
think we get away from that?
a lot of recruiters don't want to do that because they got into this career for a very reason. They want to connect with candidates. They want to help candidates get a job. They want to be that critical link between a candidate and the business. And that's where the fear is coming in with AI replacing the recruiter, which is diminishing that human connection with the candidate. And then it's impacting the human recruiters that really love that job and love that part of the role. They don't want to just do the admin side of things. They want to build a connection with that human. They want to tell them why it's great to work at this company. They want to get excited when they accept the offer and come on board. You replace AI with that, and I think a lot of candidates, they buy into the recruiter, they buy into the company because they're buying into the culture. If you've just talked to a bot most of the time throughout your hiring process, are you really bought in? And then if you've got 3 offers on the table, which one are you going to pick? You're going to pick the one that you're more connected to, the one that you feel more emotionally attached to. And that's where I feel like businesses could be doing themselves a disservice if they implement AI too much and replace too much of the human experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my opinion is that more and more candidates will be drawn to companies that keep the human in the loop throughout the process. I agree with you. It's like how we start the relationship with that person is so important. I want to fast forward a bit. I had a whole bunch of other questions I was going to ask you as it relates to AI, but I feel like we covered some really good ground. I want to learn a little bit more about what you're doing with your company. Tell us a little bit more about the reason why you started your company, what you're focusing on, and what problems you're trying to solve.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, so with my business, there's 2 distinctive areas of my business. One being fractional talent acquisition, and obviously I talked about that earlier. And I'm loving working with clients on a fractional basis and building out their infrastructure, making sure that they do have great tools and processes and the resources in place to drive their business. That's my sweet spot. That's what I do. That's what I think I'm good at. And so I'm working with various clients to help them get that infrastructure in a place. And then the other side of my business is actually career coaching. After all my years of managing global teams and mentorship, and I've gone through coaching programs myself, I'm pretty excited to be rolling out career coaching for women in the mid part of their career. And so that's going to be coming out shortly. So that's what I've been working on. But so I'm split into those 2 areas.
What are the big differences for you coming out of corporate talent acquisition leadership and now moving into a fractional role?
Oh my gosh. Obviously lots of differences. You realize you don't have a 401k and pay time off. But then you've got the excitement of utilizing your experience and your knowledge in the way that you want and seeing the benefits of it on clients, building in a bit more flexibility into how I work, which is really exciting, and wearing multiple different hats. I mean, I have learned so much. I mean, I've never understood like business tax now, and I'm not an expert, but I've had to understand, well, what's business tax? And I'm not a marketing expert, so I've had to sort of learn more about marketing. And I've actually hired a marketing intern to assist me, because that's one thing that I've missed coming out of corporate is I've always loved leading a team. And so to have a marketing intern and seeing him learn and grow and me being able to mentor him, but also plugging into his wicked brain and knowledge and expertise is benefiting me. So that's really great. And I really love that. And really just admitting like what you know and what you don't know. And getting over the fear. I think, I've really had to push that imposter syndrome aside and go, just do it. Just start, because if you don't start, you'll just never know. So it's been an adjustment, but I love it, and I'm loving the journey, and having conversations like with you like this is great. And it's early days, but I'm excited.
Talk to that person who maybe used to be on your team and is thinking about starting up their own company, maybe stepping into a fractional role, contract recruiting, one man, one woman shop. Either way, talk to that person and tell them how they're going to get over the fear of being able to step out on their own, and maybe what's worked for you.
Dig into your inner confidence. You know what you're good at, and really hang on to that, but also admit where perhaps your weaknesses are, right? And that's okay. We all have those, but focus on your strengths and focus on where you can really benefit in your career by utilizing your experience. But you also have to really think that it doesn't have to be forever, but do it. Get over the fear, go for it. There are clients, there are companies that do need you. They might not need you on a permanent basis. We've seen that. But there are definitely companies that really need support for a short period of time. So network, and learn. Be a sponge. Talk to people like me. Look for other people that do fractional work. I think in general, we all want to help one another, There's also great communities out there. I've joined some really great communities, and I've learned so much from them. And so if you've got an inkling of going out alone, you're not alone. Research, keep listening, keep learning, be a sponge, and just do it. Just go for it. Don't overthink it.
I have to agree with you wholeheartedly, right? There are so many things. I feel like everybody should be an entrepreneur at some point in their career, because there is something about just having everything on you. The buck stops here. You have to figure out marketing. You have to figure out your tax filings and your bank accounts. How do customers actually pay you? Who's taking care of our customers? What kind of infrastructure do I have to have as a business? And you figure all those things out. But I also think that it's, one of the things that holds people back. I've had a lot of conversations with folks who are experts in what they do. They are so good at what they do, but they may work for a Fortune 500 company today. And in their mindset, they're thinking, well, how would I sell my services to a Fortune 500 brand? And I'm like, well, you don't have to. There is a whole slew of companies, smaller to medium-sized businesses, that would benefit so much from someone who has the experience of how this function operates in a Fortune 500 company. Not that we can do the exact same thing, but how do we get more of those practices built in? Would you say that that's more of the types of companies that you might target or plan on working with?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And so, and I've had so many smaller businesses reach out to me with their area of expertise, virtual assistants, marketing assistants, and all those things where I'm like, I know I'm not good at that, and that's where I need help. But this is what I'm good at. So to free me up to do this, I might need to buy in some of this support, from others. It's okay to admit that you can't do everything or don't know everything, because you just don't. And any good business leader, what do? They hire what they don't know. They're like, I need an operations leader, I need a lawyer, I need HR, because you're not someone that has all of those areas of expertise. So you're going to be more successful as an entrepreneur by really focusing on what you're good at and delegate and hire what you don't know and build from there. And it frees you up to do what you're good at. That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Let's shift over to the other side of your business in terms of coaching and being able to help and support women. As you're thinking about the most effective way of being able to do that, are you looking to guide, throw a couple of ideas out there, folks who might be making a career change? Are you thinking more along the lines of those who are trying to just become specialists and go deeper and further in their careers? Maybe it's all the above, or maybe those who just need to level up in this new age and upskilling in the age of AI. How are you thinking about who you really want to support in taking the next step in their careers?
All of the above, for sure. We see so many stats over the years about women leaving the workforce, trying to re-enter the workforce. You said the key thing about sort of leveling up, and I think AI is, a huge part of that. I think, and this isn't just for women, this is for sort of people in general. I think there's a huge portion of people that are still really quite fearful of AI, and it's just because they don't know what it is. They don't really understand what it is, and they don't understand how to use it. And so I don't want anyone to be left behind. So AI is definitely a part of what I would love to coach on, which is helping women, to your point, pivot their career. They might want to change industry, change specialty area. They might want to elevate. They might want to get into leadership. They might want to be like me and many other women and pivot and start their own business. I want to support them through that pivotal decision, when that career crossroads, which is actually the name of one of my programs, Career Crossroads. A part of that coaching would be, hey, this is how you can use AI in the most simple way. And then I will be bringing in experts that can help them around, again, areas that I'm not an expert in. Let's go deep into AI. Let's go deep into finances, independent finances. You could be raising children. You could be that sandwich generation of taking care of elderly parents. So for me, it is looking at like a holistic view of that woman, but obviously very centered on career. And, you've got 10, 15, 20 years under your belt. Where do you want to spend the next few decades of your time?
Are there any common mistakes that you see those mid-career professionals making that there are easy ways to avoid?
I think, in all honesty, it's thinking and hoping that the job market is the same that it was a few years ago or 10 years ago, or whenever they last applied for a job or whenever they last interviewed. It has changed so much. It goes right back to our very first topic of conversation, Rob. Is a changing landscape. And so, and I've talked to women recently on my one-on-one coaching. They've been at the same company for the last 9 years, and now they're like, oh my gosh, how do I stand out when I apply? The imposter syndrome is then taking over because they don't know how to interview and how to really shine. They've never really had to use LinkedIn. They haven't kept up with their networking. And this is not criticism. This is just people are living their lives and everything is changing so fast around them. So I don't want to say it's a mistake. It's more of, hey, I need to get you up to speed. Let's get you aware of, how the market is today, and let's really focus on how we can cut through that noise and help you stand out. So it's education and support. But the worst thing that you can do is just go ahead and apply and sit back and wait. That's just not going to work for you nowadays. There's just too much competition. There's too much AI noise. Your personal branding is more important than it ever has been. So yeah, I don't want women to get left behind. And so my coaching is to really help them like shine in today's environment.
Yeah, so needed. Couple of strategic questions for you as we're wrapping up. You talked about the job market changing. It's changed completely. It's going to keep changing. How do you see the talent acquisition function changing as we think forward 2, 3, maybe 5 years, if we can see that far ahead?
With the years ahead, I mean, obviously, it's going to continue to change and change rapidly, and obviously, more and more companies are going to embrace AI. AI is going to get more and more savvy, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's how we use it. And I think what I'm fearful of is just how it's negatively impacting candidates. I dread to think of more sort of legal situations coming out of using AI with unethical biases throughout the process. So I really hope, on a positive note, that we figure that out, that we use AI in an ethical way, in a fair way, in an efficient way, and that we don't replace all human recruiters with AI bots and lose that human touch, and that we have fantastic human recruiters that are using AI to its maximum benefits, and hiring great talent. I mean, that's what I hope for. Now, obviously, I don't have a crystal ball. Whether that's going to be the case over the next like 2 to 5 years, we will see. But you know, we've seen some companies and some CEOs that have been heavily using AI that have put their hand up and gone, "Whoops, we've overused it." And actually our customer service has plummeted, or clients have exited because out of frustration for not having that human connection. And so, you know, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see what the future holds for TA. I do wonder that when the market does change and the economy changes, and hopefully companies will be back to booming and hiring, that they will definitely see the benefit of hiring human recruiters to manage the process.
Yeah. Yeah. These things are definitely cyclical. In my 15-year career, I have seen it multiple times already. And so we know that the swing is coming. You talked about headcount planning a while ago, and I want to end there because, yes, AI is going to continue to move forward. And yes, there are some functions within every business today that we will not necessarily need a team of humans to be doing. We can have a conversation about what those functions actually are. But when it comes to headcount planning, what's the role that talent acquisition plays in being able to help a company to understand that just because someone's in one function today doesn't mean that they can't be used in other functions as the world moves forward? What's the role that talent acquisition plays in maybe driving some of the conversation around how do we upskill the people who have already committed themselves to this company into the roles of the future?
I love this topic. This is kind of my thing because I've actually rolled out quite a few internal mobility programs. I'm a massive fan of, you know, looking at the great talent that you have in your organization today. And to your point, upskilling them, keeping them, helping them grow their career instead of losing them and then replacing them or helping them pivot. I've seen many people go from one function, one team to another, and it's worked beautifully and seamlessly. And so I think more companies need to invest in their employees when it comes to training and career development instead of just keep hiring from the outside. That is actually, you know, from a business standpoint, that's incredibly expensive and time consuming. And then why would you want to lose somebody that's great, that's been working hard and is loyal and has wonderful skills and knowledge about your business? Keep them, invest in them, train them, develop them. And again, now that we have AI, utilize it to help design fantastic internal training programs You know, if you put your employees through compliance training, IT training, put them through AI training, put them through management and leadership training, and you can pull on your HR, teams and employees to help you with that, and they can use AI to very quickly pull some really great training programs together. So again, I think there's so many great opportunities that businesses overlook in organizations when you're just trying to work hard and fast and pull on those expertise and let them run with it. But don't lose great talent because you're not focusing on your employees. Your people are your business.
I completely agree. We have to leave it there. It's been such a good conversation. Rachel, tell people where they can find you. If someone's thinking about fractional talent acquisition services or career coaching, how do they get a hold of you?
Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn and I do answer every single message, I promise. So feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. Also on my LinkedIn profile, you'll see links to my websites. I've actually got 2 different websites, but you can ping me on either one and I will respond to you. Or you can email me, rachel@ignitetalentco.com. I would love to hear from you and I will respond to you. And Rob, thank you so much for your time. This has been such a great conversation.
Absolutely. No, let me second. Definitely make sure you're following Rachel on LinkedIn. You put out such interesting content, and maybe it's just folks who are in talent acquisition. I don't think so. I think it's so interesting. You're revealing some of the areas of the industry that don't get talked about enough. And that was why I wanted to have you here on the podcast. So thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate. For those who are watching, we'll continue to put out content like this with talent leaders, with tech leaders, continuing to talk about the way that the landscape is changing and shifting and what we can all do to stay ahead of it. So we'll see you next time.